Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is May 23rd, 2016, and we're going to talk about a number of different topics tonight. Last week we focused a lot on the Syrian crisis. We'll be mentioning that briefly tonight as well, but we're going to move on to some other international and domestic issues to try to round that up if we can, and so we can focus on more specific things in the coming weeks in terms of solutions and in terms of how we're going to practically put everything in motion in order to try and implement these solutions. So there's going to be a lot more activism that takes place in the very near future that we hope to get you involved with. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time tonight, I'd like to encourage you to catch Truth on the Tracks here every Monday night and Friday night. Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ucy.tv. You can access the show's personal page at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. If you're interested in my work, then I'd encourage you to go to naturalblaze.com, activistpost.com, eraofwisdom.org, and brandonturbeville.com. Now, just to go ahead and let you know, I apologize for any of the background noise that you may be hearing. We are on the road tonight, and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of other excess noise that you're probably going to be hearing from time to time. So hopefully the show is going to come through well enough. Now, my work specifically, if you're interested in my work specifically, I'd encourage you to go to BrandonTurbeville.com, and that is the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the YouTube videos, all the archived versions of this show. All that's available there at BrandonTurbeville.com, as well as the books, other relevant information. Also, now, just to remind you, there is an offer now. M. Lawrence, author of The Animals Say No Way, which is a children's book designed to educate children about the dangers of GMOs. Very good little book. Lawrence has offered us that book to offer to you as a thank you gift if you want to donate to me. Right? So you can do that by, you go to my website and just type in donations. You'll see the donation instructions there on the page. But basically, it's pretty simple, right? If you want to donate $30 or more, you will receive a free copy of The Animals Say No Way by M. Lawrence. Again, that's a children's book that is designed to educate children in a fun way, interesting way, without terrifying them or scaring them to death or being too preachy. It's got tons of very good illustrations in that book. In fact, it was highly praised by F. William Engdahl, the author of Seeds of Destruction, for being a great book. So please go take a look at that. But if you want to donate and receive the book, then basically what you'll need to do is contact me, send me an email at anticodex@yahoo.com, and put in the subject line book donation or something to that effect, and let me know that you are looking to donate $30 or more and receive the book. So you'll send me that email. Make sure you provide your shipping address where you want the book to be sent, and this information will be provided to the shipper so they could send that to you. So once you give me an email with book donation or something like that in the title, with your name and shipping address, then you can I will respond to that email with my PayPal information, and you can make a payment to me. Once that payment is confirmed, the book will be shipped to you. It's very simple. All you have to do, remember, just email me, anticodex@yahoo.com, and let me know what you want to do. $30 or more and you'll get the book. So just feel free to send me an email in regards to that. All right, so now let's take a look at the international situation. I always like to begin with the international situation. Just go down the line with a number of news briefs, I guess. Now, in order to understand what's happening in Azerbaijan and Armenia, there's been a growing conflict there that this is not something that's likely to bring the United States and Russia into a conflict, but it is potentially something that could bring Russia and Turkey into a conflict. And if Turkey's brought into a conflict, Turkey is, of course, a member of NATO, so we can see where that could go. But you're seeing more and more of this issue being brought up in the mainstream press. So I think it's important for people to look at the conflict, right? This has been a conflict that's sort of regularly ignited between both Armenia and Azerbaijan, and over the recent months we've seen a flare-up that's really threatening to throw another part of the world into chaos and open warfare. Now, on April 5th, Russia was able to organize and mediate between some of the chief officials of the Azeri and Armenian militaries, and they managed to get a ceasefire agreement going on what they call the contact line in this region called Nagorno-Karabakh, or Karabakh. Right? This is an area that's currently being fought over by Armenia and Azerbaijan and the Armenian militias in the area. So ever since the ceasefire agreement was made, we've had sides trading accusations that the other side is violating the agreement. The accusations are so numerous that you can scarcely call the ceasefire a functioning agreement. We had Armenia claiming that in 24-hour period alone that Azerbaijan violated the ceasefire 50 times. And we've got similar claims being made against the Armenians by the Azeris. So let's take a look briefly about how this conflict started taking shape. Now, the roots of the conflict are connected to both national histories and the fall of the Soviet Union, as well as ethnic histories and regional ties. So basically, in the late 1980s, there was a referendum held by the inhabitants of Nagorno-Karabakh, that region where there's a majority Armenian population, and it largely voted for reunification with Armenia. And there's a minority Azeri population. They boycotted the vote. The vote obviously favored independence from Azerbaijan and favored reunification with Armenia, which caused a rift between both countries, right? And it escalated from a political disagreement and social disharmony to outright violence and eventually military operations that just continued to grow, particularly as the Soviet Union collapsed and as it became more and more apparent that was going to happen. Now, Nagorno-Karabakh is this small enclave that's located within Azerbaijan, but that territory is actually held by Armenian, what should we say, paramilitaries, a self-declared government, sort of militias. It's called the government of Nagorno-Karabakh, but it's not an official government. And essentially, this territory spans the border from Armenia and Azerbaijan. It goes across the border. But a lot of it is in Azeri territory. Now, as I just mentioned, that referendum was held which favored reunification with Armenia. Most of the people in this area are Armenian, very small Azeri population there. And again, it goes back and forth between the two borders. So it's kind of difficult to describe without having a map in front of us, but that's what we're trying to do. Basically, the territory that's held by Armenian forces, it surrounds Nagorno-Karabakh and extends past its boundaries, the boundaries of Nagorno-Karabakh. And that creates sort of a novel border dispute between both of the countries, as well as a porous border situation. So hopefully that was understandable to see what I'm trying to get across here. Now, in Azerbaijan, the declaration of separation by the residents of Nagorno-Karabakh, that and the subsequent defeat of the Azeri army to Armenian forces, who were perceived as being drastically inferior in terms of military and demographic strength, that intensified nationalist feelings in Azerbaijan. And as a result of that, we have this campaign of destruction against ancient Armenian sites in Azerbaijan, in this attempt to erase any cultural history and evidence and legacy the Armenians had in Azerbaijan, as well as to provide this opportunity for the falsification of history in regards to the Armenian presence and connection to the land. Now, this is the same method, just to be noted, that was employed by Turkey in the time leading up to the Armenian genocide in Turkey. It's the same method also that ISIS uses regarding Shiites and Christians and other religious artifacts and sites in its general area. So as a result of all this, after being faced with the anti-Armenian sentiment in Azerbaijan, the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh are even more entrenched and committed to the idea of independence and separation from the Azeri national government. Now, we have outside forces and inside forces that are at work here. Turkey plays a conspicuous role in this conflict. The Azeris have ethnic and linguistic ties to the Turks and Turkey. They've shared a very rich history, very bloody history of discrimination and antipathy and malevolence and violence toward Armenians. They are also they have a very staunch anti-Armenian history, which is coupled with Erdogan's Islamism today. All of that's contributed to the reasoning behind Erdogan's recent statement that Turkey is going to stand with Azerbaijan to the end. Now, we have geopolitical elements at play here as well. We have the Turkish nationalist Grey Wolves, who operate a chapter in Azerbaijan. We've talked about them on the show in the past, and that's a clear indication that NATO, and not only the Turks, has a clear foot in Azerbaijan. But the Grey Wolves, functioning as an arm of Turkey, have also been used to destabilize China and Syria and other locations as well. Now, when I mention NATO, it's important to point out that Azerbaijan is an active participant in NATO's Partnership for Peace, an individual partnership action plan. Azerbaijan has also shown signs that it intends to become a member of NATO itself in the very near future. Now, on the other hand, we have Armenia. Now, Armenia is also a member of the NATO Partnership for Peace program, the Partnership Against Terrorism, and the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council. It's not a member of NATO. There are talks of the future of Armenia by opposition parties. And I put opposition parties in quotes because these people are arguing for joining the Anglo-American world army that is NATO, but they seem to be perhaps at face value. This is something that we'll have to look in deeper, but we wonder if whether or not these organizations are not being supported by NATO itself or NATO-backed NGOs. So we have to take a look into that. Now, we got Russia involved as well. Russia is heavily involved in Armenia and Azerbaijan. In 2015, there was a report released which claimed that Azerbaijan purchased around 85% of its weapons from Russia in the past 5 years, so from 2010 to 2015. The weapons transfers amounted to about $4 billion worth of transactions. Now, with Armenia, the Russian ties go even deeper, since it's a small nation, hosts 2 Russian military bases, and it serves as an extension of Russian influence in the region, as well as a deterrent against Turkey. Now, because Russia maintains such close ties with both nations, we have this precarious position for the Russian leadership in regards to this conflict. On one hand, weapons deals and military bases provide a close relationship to, provide a foundation to negotiate a peaceful solution here. On the other hand, that close relationship that it has with both countries could, it most definitely provides the need to walk carefully so you don't appear to be taking one side over the other and then isolating one of your partners. One false step in this situation can cost Russia either billions of dollars or a lot of influence or bases, etc. So with all of that in mind, both Armenia and Azerbaijan are clearly attempting to walk a tightrope between two world powers that could be potentially explosive and could ignite the region in warfare. When we have the Syrian conflict and the Armenian Azeri conflict holding so much interest for Russia and Turkey, the potential for Erdogan to overplay his hand in this situation is a distinct possibility. The guy is eaten up with hubris. It goes beyond other world leaders with Erdogan. It's the most unfortunate aspect that loss of one's senses here is that the general population is going to pay the price in blood and treasure for the hubris of a leader like Erdogan. Now, speaking of Erdogan, we recently had the 13th Islamic Summit, which was called Unity and Solidarity for Justice and Peace. This was set up by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the IOC, and it took place on April 12th in Istanbul, Turkey. And it yielded some revealing but not really unsuspected news. At this summit, which was chaired by Erdogan himself, we have more signs emerging of a Turkish GCC attempt to not only continue to destabilize Syria, but an attempt to extend that destabilization into Eurasia, up to the Russian border, and even inside Russian territory itself. During the course of the summit, then Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu addressed the issues of what they refer to as the occupied Islamic territories. That means Palestine, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Crimea. And in this discussion, he expressed concerns about the development of those situations. He said that these areas needed to be rescued via cultural, religious, and other means, but he wasn't specific as to what these other means might be. Is this force? Is this military invasion? We don't know. What is he referring to? Now, he also referred to the Crimean issue as one of the main issues of the summit. Now, although the Turkish version of the summit's communique was not ultimately accepted by the group, the communique that was produced condemned what they referred to as Armenian aggression in Nagorno-Karabakh, and it expressed interest in the Crimean situation. Now, we should just briefly note, Mustafa Zhemilev, this was the former chairman of the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people. He was presented at the summit as the only legitimate representative of the Crimean people. Zhemilev held a joint meeting at the summit with the Turkish and Azeri presidents during the course that the summit took place. In addition to that, we had King Salman of Saudi Arabia being in attendance and being greeted at the airport by Erdogan, who later presented the Saudi king with an award at an official ceremony. Now, it's fairly unusual, from what I understand, for national leaders to go to the airport to greet other national leaders, at least in this situation. It's something that's unique. Now, we've got news reports coming out of the organization South Front that is suggesting that Saudi Arabia and Qatar are using Turkey to expand their influence in Eurasia and eventually the European Union. South Front is arguing that Turkey has accepted this whole scheme and is currently moving forward in terms of implementing it. Regardless, Turkey's attempt to stir up the crisis in Ukraine by using Crimea and the Tatar population really isn't anything new. Remember, on August 1st and 2nd, we had a meeting convened at the Hotel Bilkent in Ankara, in Turkey, called the Second World Congress of the Tatars. This meeting brought about over 200 Tatar NGOs and associations from all over the world, brought them together. And the event was also attended by Ukrainian Foreign Minister Pavlo Klimkin and the Turkish Deputy Prime Minister Numan Kurtulmus. This was this meeting. We had both officials participating in that event, not just attending. Now, we had a report from Today's Zaman Sihan. This was a Turkish website. It was a report entitled Crimean Tatars Gather in Ankara to Discuss Ukrainian Crisis, where we had reports about all this stuff taking place. And one of the reports suggested that it was focused on the condition of the Crimean Tatars, and the condition was presented as inherently negative about how the Russians were encroaching onto the Tatar cultural life. And the gathering offered an opportunity for a lot of discussion about how to resolve the conflict in Ukraine and to maintain the Tatars' community rights under the Russian administration. But while Russia and the annexation of Crimea were the focus of the meeting, we had this potentially dangerous decision, foolish decision being made between Ukraine and Turkey. That is the announcement that was made by Mustafa Abdulsamil Similoglu, who was the acting leader of the Crimean Tatars. An announcement was made by him and by President Poroshenko of Ukraine, the creation of a Muslim brigade to oppose Crimean separatism. Right, that's what they're referring to it as well as human trafficking and the transportation of goods near conflict zones, etc. In other words, the meeting spawned the creation of a terrorist brigade to combat Russian involvement in Crimea and pro-Russian sentiment and activism in the area. So, we just briefly should note that Similoglu was a notorious CIA asset and collaborator throughout the Reagan administration years. He was also the former leader of the Crimea Tatar Majlis also. Now, after that announcement was made by Similoglu, he was received by Turkish President Erdogan, who assured him that Turkey would give its full support for the Tatars against Russia. Turkey's been vocal about the so-called territorial integrity of Ukraine in the past, and like the rest of NATO, he's taken a strong anti-Russian stance on the issue of Ukraine. The Muslim Brigade was supposed to be based at Kherson, near the Crimean border, and was designed to include volunteers and jihadists from a number of other locations in the region, what they refer to as Tatarstan or Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Chechnya, Georgia. Turkey obviously wasn't going to be left out of the mix, since it committed itself to donate a number of the jihadists that was currently operating within its own borders for the purpose of destroying Syria to the new Muslim Brigade in Ukraine. Now, we know that Turkey's already acted on that jihadist-based intervention in Ukraine and has been doing so since December 2013. Turkish intelligence sent a number of Tatar jihadists to Ukraine so they'd be able to assist the Western-backed color revolution in Kiev, where the terrorists actually acted as security for pro-European, anti-Russian protests in the Maidan, and they're often reported and is being suspected of being the culprits behind a number of violent acts that resulted in the subsequent crackdown by Ukrainian police. We actually had a report coming out that these guys were members of the Azatlik movement. That's the freedom movement led by Nail Nabulin and the Campaign for Greater Turkey. That they were backed by Trotskyist parties like the Russian Left Front of Sergei Udaltsov, as well as the Turkish government of Erdogan, and that many of them had actually come back from Syria through Turkey, where they had gone to engage in warfare against the Syrian government. They seemed to be behind the provocations that led the riot police to actually crack down. Now, with all of that in mind, it's concerning that Turkey and Ukraine have taken steps for greater provocations against Russia. This time using jihadists on Russian borders and inside Russian borders. All these moves clearly increase the likelihood that Russia is going to be forced to engage NATO and the proxies in some type of direct military fashion at some point. Now, color revolutions, if they're caught early enough, can be eliminated by removing the NGOs, removing the foundations, removing the activists responsible for organizing these golden youth But repeated acts of suicidal terrorism, that has to be cut off at the source, or it's going to continue to take place, and it will take place indefinitely or until the mission has been accomplished. If Russia ever finds itself completely surrounded by the U.S. and NATO military bases and missile systems at the same time, being faced with economic warfare and sanctions, it's going to view its current position of non-intervention as untenable, especially when it's faced with cross-border terrorist attacks that are being openly supported by NATO countries. Now, it appears that Putin is already well aware of the attempts by NATO and Turkey to use terrorism against Russia and inside Russian borders. We have Putin, during a visit to the Crimea, saying, quote, "It's obvious that a risk remains from outside forces to destabilize the situation on the Crimean Peninsula in one way or another. In certain capitals, they talk openly about the need to carry out subversive activities. Personnel are being recruited and trained to carry out subversion, acts of sabotage to conduct radical propaganda," end quote. So that move by Turkey kind of bolsters the assertions that are made by some people, Webster Tarpley being one of them, that the Turkish bombing of ISIS, on the rare instances where ISIS forces are actually bombed, is nothing more than an attempt to push some of these ISIS forces east towards Iran and eventually to Russia. In other words, death squad herding, but not just in Syria, not just to new positions in Iraq, but to new positions on the world chessboard, Russia, Iran, that sort of thing. So all of this obviously needs to stop. Erdogan needs to be stopped as well. Now, just another word about Syria. After the Russians had this small, limited drawdown of troops and aircraft from Syria, we had the Western press launching a jihad of its own, barely being able to contain itself from making the claims that the Russians were running scared from ISIS, despite the fact that the Russian and Syrian alliance, along with Hezbollah and Iraq and Iran, had done more to destroy the group in weeks than the U.S. had done in years. In fact, I guess we should say they've done more in the first second than the U.S. has done in years, because the U.S. has been funding the organization and directing it and arming it, etc. Now, the Russian drawdown was limited, and it was merely a change in strategy, I guess. After the initial phase of the Russian involvement had been completed, Russia was ordering another round of military equipment to Syria. They were readjusting the personnel and the assets that they had. It was simply moving on to phase two. But now we have a point where Russia is apparently sending an aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, to the Mediterranean. I'm not going to go through the dimensions. Russia does not have the aircraft carrier capability that the United States has by any stretch of the imagination, but it is heading toward the Mediterranean. We had early April reports reported by TASS news agency, actually cited the Russian military sources who said that the Admiral Kuznetsov would be heading to the Mediterranean, leading the naval group there by summer of 2016. So it seems that that is actually going to be taking place. Now, the Russian bloc leads us to the question of Algeria. We haven't talked that much about Algeria on the show, but we probably should from time to time. That's why I need to bring it up now so it's on the radar. The Syrian crisis is dragging on, and any hopes of a peaceful resolution seem to be disappearing when it comes to Libya. But Algeria needs to be aware that it might find itself in the Anglo-American crosshairs in the very near future. And I do believe that there's quite a bit of evidence that Algeria is realizing that now. Now, Algeria has already survived an attempted destabilization during the Arab Spring, the Western-inspired, the Western-orchestrated Arab Spring color revolution. Algeria since then has been doing whatever it can to increase security in its borders, on its borders, around its borders. It's increased cooperation with Tunisia. Tunisia has been the target of terrorist attacks that appear to be backed by the West and the GCC nations in recent months. And now Algeria is trying to cooperate with them in greater ways so that it can increase that border security. Now, during the Arab Spring, Algeria reacted quickly. It reacted with an iron fist, and any attempt to disrupt the functioning of the Algerian government was immediately quashed during the color revolutions that were taking place across the Middle East and North Africa. And there were protests, but they were short-lived, they were ineffective. But in the aftermath, Algeria didn't simply rest on its laurels and be happy that the status quo had been returned to. It moved to increase security, improved military capabilities, and worked with its neighbors to make sure that they didn't fall prey to destabilizations or color revolutions in the future. But it's also moved to deepen its ties with Russia, and not just Russia, but the countries that are part of this unofficial developing anti-NATO bloc. In other words, it's moving closer to officially joining, or at least in practice joining, the multipolar world of Russia and the Russian-led anti-NATO coalition, this counterforce to the NATO powers. Now, two instances of this. We had increased cooperation between Algeria and the anti-NATO alliance. Right? We have, first, the provision of 40 attack helicopters by Russia to Algeria, and then we have the visit to Syria by the Algerian government. Now, let's look at the first one. The Russian government is delivering a number of helicopters to Algeria. They're known as the Night Hunter. They're reported to be one of the best in the world. It's capable of carrying out missions day and night, as well as adverse weather conditions. It comes with an Mi-28NE modification capability that allows it to be flown from the pilot's cockpit and the operator pilot's cockpit. It's state of the art. Now, the delivery of the Russian helicopters is not anything new. In 2005, 2006, Russia provided Algeria with a number of these jet trainers with tanks. They also provided in 2015, well, they didn't provide, but the contract was signed for jet fighters. We had a number of other these military equipment contracts signed as well. We had the Mi-28 helicopters being transferred as a result of this bilateral agreement. Now, the deliveries are not really newsworthy in and of itself, but the context in which they occur is worth discussing. Now, Algeria is become more concerned with increased amounts of ISIS activity in the region, notably in Libya and Tunisia. And it's focusing on policing its borders with both of those countries, but also with Niger and Mali for the same reason. And it's in the past reacted quickly to terrorist threats, but it's worried that ISIS attacks are eventually going to take place inside of Algeria, particularly as a result of Western targeting of the Algerian government. So in February, Algeria and Russia launched this plan to deepen bilateral military and economic cooperation. So that's an obvious sign that Algeria and Russia are moving closer together. In regards to Syria, April 25th is now the first official visit to Syria by an Algerian official since 2011. Now that's showing a growing tendency to increase ties and cooperation with not only Syria, but Syria despite the whining and bitching of the United States and the European Union and NATO. We had Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Muallim paying a visit to the Algerian capital, and he stated at the time that the visit was to deepen and strengthen economic ties between the two countries. So we have this picture developing where Algeria is clearly moving toward not only Russia, but to the so-called enemies of the United States. These are enemies that the United States has made itself, but it's still moving toward those anti-NATO countries, anti-NATO coalition, I guess we should say. Now, it's what started out as an attempt to divide and destroy Iran's arc of influence in the region is actually making Iran stronger in a sense, right? So we have these forces of ISIS who are being destroyed in Syria. Now, it's taken a toll on the Syrians, but ISIS forces are being dealt with in Syria. It's reducing the number of these jihadists and is reducing their fighting ability. But they appear to be often, many of them being moved out of Syria to another battlefront, right? A lot of them appear to be moved to Libya, where they're out of the reach of the Iranian coalition, the Syrian coalition, Hezbollah, Iraq, and that sort of thing, as well as the Russians. But placing them in Libya allows for other projects to be revisited, right? And that's destabilization and destruction of countries that were not destabilized, or at least not destroyed, during the first Arab Spring. So that leaves us with what? Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, a couple of others. So if we see an increase of ISIS presence in Libya, that could be used as a pretext for an open-ended, much more broad military intervention throughout Africa, not just Libya, but Africa in general, by U.S. forces and the NATO coalition and the GCC. Just what they did in Syria, where they conducted operations for over a year and a half to really destroy the Syrian government and to get a foothold in the region and prop up terrorist proxy forces and undermine and target these different nations. It's possible that they're going to move back into Libya and do the same thing and then spread those effects beyond Libya. So this is the reason that we see Algeria starting to prepare for that potential shift in the Western focus, right, in terms of specific battlefields, moving from Syria to Libya and westward from there. So what I've just described to you is not earth-shattering news, but it's something that needs to be addressed, and we need to keep that in our peripheral vision. Nonetheless, now I want to transition from the international situation to something that will have international ramifications, and that is the U.S. presidential election. Every time I discuss this, I have to preface my statement with the fact that no matter my hatred and disgust and horror at the thought of electing Hillary Clinton, this is not an endorsement of Bernie Sanders. This is not an endorsement of Bernie, the socialist bomber. This is not an endorsement of Donald Fascist Trump. But this is important to point out about Hillary Clinton, or Killary Clinton, I guess is what we'll call her since we're coming up with names. This woman is clearly the choice of the oligarchs. No one can survive that many scandals and to no avail, with no ramifications at all, without deep support by the oligarchy. And that's exactly what she's done. Now, I just want to touch on a few issues. I want to remind you to check out my book, The Difference It Makes, 36 Reasons Why Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President, which is available on Amazon.com in hard copy form and Kindle form. But you can also buy the book, get the book for free on my website at BrandonTurbeville.com. It's there in a free PDF. Now, just a couple issues I want to point out. Hillary is obviously being given left cover simply because of the fascist Trump. Bernie is doing some good, I guess we should say, despite himself, doing some good in shredding a bit of that leftist veneer. But when compared to Trump, Hillary is going to be presented as the leftist, right? Hillary Clinton supports unions. Hillary Clinton supports workers' rights. Hillary Clinton supports working people and and bringing jobs to America. Well, of course, all of that is bullshit, and all you have to do is look at her record. We have, as early as 2013, Alice Walton, the heiress to the Walmart fortune, who was donating the maximum amount allowed by law to the Ready for Hillary PAC, right? It was only $25,000, but still. The Clinton Foundation has received a sizable amount of direct donations from Walmart. In fact, the Walmart Foundation's even donated anywhere from $1 to $5 million to the Clinton Foundation in 2013 alone. The Walmart Foundation has funded and hosted a number of energy and climate change awards for the Clinton Global Initiative. And the assistance and promotion has been reciprocal. The Clinton Global Initiative posted a rave review of the Walmart Corporation recently, and it named it one of the companies that make, quote, great efforts to empower girls and women. Really, Walmart. It was. Well, I wonder what it is that empowers girls and women. Is it the empowerment of slave labor wages? Is it the empowerment of a humiliating work environment? Maybe what's empowering is the abusive labor policies of Walmart that empowers girls and women. In fact, I believe there was a question about the way Walmart treated its female employees about a year ago. But those questions, of course, don't go answered by the Clintons, because the Clintons don't have to answer questions. Now, the Clintons also assisted Walmart in the past regarding its effort to appear more environmentally friendly. Bill Clinton met with the past Walmart CEO Lee Scott, apparently when he was not busy flying across the world on Jeffrey Epstein's jets, possibly abusing young girls. They did this to help boost the Walmart relationship with environmentalists, which should be zilch. It should be nothing, because Walmart doesn't do anything for the environment except to destroy it. But the Clinton connection to Walmart goes much further back than 2013. For decades, she's been on corporate boards, right? But she was on the Walmart corporate board. One of her first high-profile public positions was at Walmart. She was on the board from 1986 to 1992. And in that position, she, quote, remained silent, end quote, in the board meetings when her company, when she was on the Walmart board, waged a campaign against labor unions that was trying to represent store workers, right? So in her 2003 book, she says that Sam Walton, quote, taught me a great deal about corporate integrity and success, end quote. Now, later on, when she was running for office again, she tried to shed that public identification with the company and try to attract labor support for the Senate and presidential candidacies. But Walmart executives, of course, have continued to look favorably on her with the donations that I just mentioned earlier. And of course, the donation, $25,000, was considerably higher than the average annual salary for any Walmart hourly employees, or most of them. And of course, 2/3 of them are women. I guess they're feeling very empowered right now by that low wage. Now, in regards to her remaining silent on Walmart's war on labor and labor unions, when she served on the Walmart board, Clinton did much more than remain silent, right? Clinton, ironically, was one of the first women to serve on the board of the company, and I imagine that is what they consider empowering women, because they hired a witch to sit on the corporate board. The Village Voice had an article in 2000 which denounced her Walmart past, but what they also pointed out was that the spot on the board wasn't just an open seat. It was designed just for her. She wasn't filling open vacancies, and they didn't replace her seat when she resigned in 1992. Her ties to Walmart were not confined to the board either, because Walmart was one of Rose's clients, and of course, according to the 1994 New York Times article, Hillary served as a director for the firm's Walmart representation. Now, in 2007, we have the New York Times reporting that during her time on the board, she pushed for greater representation for women in the company's management, led an advisory group that focused on saying Walmart could improve its environmental practices. But during a shareholder meeting the year after she joined the company, Walton said glowing things about her, right? That they should be advancing women. Well, they've got 2/3 women working at Walmart. How's that working out for women? Not very well. Unionization, though, which is generally the primary leftist complaint against Walmart, Clinton didn't have anything to say. The videotapes from the Walmart meetings show that Clinton did nothing, said nothing, did not oppose the Walmart war against labor unions. She was not a dissenter, said the fellow board members. She was a part of those decisions, so at the very least she didn't dissent. Even while Bill Clinton, served as the governor of Arkansas, we had both the Clintons, due to Hillary's position on the board, traveling for free on the Walmart corporate jet 14 times in the span between 1990 and 1991. Bill was a widespread defender of Walmart during his tenure as governor, and that's not surprising since Bill depended on Walmart for funding his campaigns at the state and federal level. But it's a true pity, though, that union members, we can assume the big union bosses are not unaware of Clinton's Walmart anti-union history, and we can assume that they are indeed quite aware of it since it's freely available on the internet. If union members find themselves at Clinton rallies, their hard-earned dues being donated to the Clinton campaign just so they can hear empty slogans about this cackling, shrill harpy about how she supports labor unions and the right to collectively bargain, then that is a problem that should now be taken to your union boards. If your union is supporting Hillary Clinton, then you need to be fighting the head of your union, because they are working against you. Union members, unite. If your union is donating your dues to Hillary Clinton, if they're promoting Hillary Clinton, if they are endorsing Hillary Clinton, your union must depose these people, and they can start endorsing people who actually support unions. Now, as you can see from her past, when she finally seizes the reins of power, she's going to do her part, as she's already done, in crushing union formation and crushing workers' rights and reasonable working conditions. And the empty slogans, though, are going to keep coming out because they never stop. That's the one thing that the Clintons are really good at. Now, the environment. She had to work with the environment, right? We have Clinton prattling on about disproven theories like man-made, CO2-based climate change. We still have the planet being raped and pillaged by international corporations, and deforestation and pollution, general overuse, without a peep from Clinton or Al Gore. It's just a lot like Al Gore, where Clinton was recently seen boarding a private jet, quite the carbon emitter and fuel drinker for somebody who's so concerned about the environment. And she did that only hours after launching this non-statement of her plans for what she calls a greener climate if she wins the presidency. Now, her plans to fight climate change as president are like most of her 2016 positions, which are almost indecipherable from her website or her current statements to the campaign trail. Her actual opinions and plans, we have to look to the past and to the periphery. And at this point, it's important to note some pretty basic problems with the theory of anthropogenic, man-made climate change. In other words, CO2-based, man-made climate change, global warming. Now, we don't have time to debunk this here on this show, but we can give you a summation, right, is how it relates to CO2 as a poisonous planet-killing gas. Now, the Earth, we know the Earth was much hotter in the past, which is indicating that we are well within the norm of climate ups and downs. In addition, it's important to mention that global warming has not taken place in the last 18 years, despite the rigging of scientific equipment that is designed to create faulty computer models to prove the opposite, calling into question whether the planet's actually warming at all. But that's where we are. But that doesn't stop Hillary Clinton from going across the world promoting the idea of human population and the growth of food and air conditioning and heat and travel and industry is the greatest threat to world civilization. In fact, the Clinton theory is nothing more than a veil over a plan to deindustrialize the West and reduce the world population and bring the world into an open state of neo-feudalism. And that was a policy that was devised by the Club of Rome decades ago. Now, the same is the goal of the carbon taxes, which are themselves, they're nothing more than a tax on a production, on living standards, human necessities. Cap and trade, that's just another form of carbon tax system where companies can trade carbon credits to reduce emissions. That's just a fresh new derivatives bubble built out of the taxes and fees put upon the necessities of the American public. Clinton, by the way, has supported cap and trade plans in the past. But the 2016 Clinton plan seems reasonable enough on the face of it, right? It's a greater focus on renewable sources of energy and an increase in the deployment of those forms of energy transmission while incentivizing green energy production, right? Fine. It's not the greatest solution, but it sounds semi-reasonable. Hillary even claims that within 10 years of her inauguration, every home in America is going to be powered by carbon-free methods. And put aside the obsession with carbon, this plan sounds like it has a decent goal. Okay? Fine. But there's one important question and one important point to make regarding her plan. First, the question is, does Hillary really intend to promote greener sources of energy? The answer, no, she doesn't, right? This is Clinton, typical Clinton speak. She talks about eliminating giveaways to big oil companies, but her campaign and much of her career as Secretary of State was promoting big oil and promoting fracking. And the reality is that for Hillary Clinton, there's a very real lack of concern for true environmental degradation. Clinton is following the methods of the Club of Rome, who argued for the deindustrialization of the West and the use of the UN's Agenda 21 plan for removing humans from the wilderness and the ability to sustain themselves independently, etc. Clinton is perhaps correct that renewable sources of energy, which are woefully inadequate in their current forms, might be able to produce most of the energy consumed by American people within 10 years of her inauguration. But unfortunately, this is going to be due to the fact that under a Clinton administration, given her history, given what she truly supports here, the cost of energy might be so high that the availability of it so rare that few individuals are going to be able to afford it. So the Clinton position, as opposed to the public Clinton campaign plan on the environment, is one that is representing a free-for-all for big oil and big industry and other major business interests across the world. But for the average American, that position is going to represent unimaginable austerity and the return to open feudalism. Now, I want to mention the political ring, but we don't have time for that. We'll perhaps get to that next week. Some good news, though. We're having, despite a world economic depression, the U.S. consumers now appear to be fighting back somewhat against the power of big agricultural companies and GMO food corporations. Now, after these corporations have seized control of virtually all the means of production of sugar beets, GM food corporations might be getting dealt a little blow that resembles a self-imposed checkmate, right? It's about 8 years ago, almost all of the sugar beet farmers in the United States started growing GMO sugar beets. And these GMO beets are genetically modified to tolerate Roundup or glyphosate, which is, obviously Monsanto and big ag companies were quite pleased with the status quo. But in the past 2 years, we've seen an increase in awareness about the dangers of GMOs, and consumers are starting to demand another option for the sugar goods and seek out sweets that don't contain GMOs, and they've begun to pressure manufacturers to discontinue using the GMO sugar beets. Now, Big Ag is not accustomed to changing their behavior based on a mere consumer. In fact, their motto seems to be eat GMOs or starve. But because of the change in the consumer appetite, manufacturers, at the very least, have seen dollar signs in regards to the non-GMO sugar beet market. So, for instance, we have Hershey's, one of the largest sugar users in the country, has begun transitioning from GMO sugar beets to sugar cane. That's not genetically modified. Sugar cane is not GMO. And we also have seen other companies following suit. As a result of that, we see big ag starting to feel the pain at the cash box. And essentially, manufacturers looking for sugar are fleeing GMO sugar beets into the arms of cane sugar. And that increased demand for cane sugar has resulted in a cane sugar shortage, with a lot of candy companies now asking the USDA to allow more imports of cane sugar so they can get it. And the transition is becoming so massive that even a number of farmers currently growing GMO beets are now considering moving to the non-GMO version just to be able to sell the product. Now, part of the reason for the transition is the increase in customer demand for non-GMO products and the desire for companies to attract buyers from that market by placing the non-GMO label on the product. So that's another great reason to at the very least, forcibly label these GMO products as GMO. So we definitely support that. Now, in just the last couple of minutes that we have, since we're ending on a high note here, I'd like to recommend, if you're a music fan, to go and check out Sturgill Simpson. I've done an article on this guy. Article's entitled "Country Artist Debuts New Song Opposing War in Syria, Iran, Iraq. Previous Material Decries Drug War, Praises Psychedelics." Sturgill Simpson's sort of an outlaw country artist, definitely not the hayseed bro country crap that gets played on the radio. Sturgill sounds a lot like Waylon Jennings back in the 70s, but it's more modern. So he's opposing the drug war, opposing war specifically in Syria and Iran and Iraq and other places. He's opposing the police state, and he's praising psychedelics, which is, of course, not something that we're accustomed to hear in the general music arena, but specifically country music. It's a breath of fresh air. So SturgillSimpson.com is where you find his music, and search for the article on my website. Please check him out. This idea of conscious country is starting to catch on. There's other musicians. We'll be talking about them in the future, and I highly recommend that you check him out. Now, of course, keep track of my articles. We're going to be updating the site daily. We're going to have some more additions to the site, the store. We're going to start working on the store very soon. And, of course, that offer for The Animals Say No Way by M. Lawrence for a $30 donation to BrandonTurbeville.com is there as well. And we recommend that you do that if you're able. You at least get something for your donation. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
JJ Inc. from Against the Wall, and you're listening to UCY.